Welcome to Train Signal. You're watching the introduction video to SharePoint Services 3.0 and SharePoint Server 2007. In this video, we're going to talk just a little bit about who your instructor is so you get to know me and where I'm coming from. Then we'll talk about what's covered in this course so you'll know what to expect. Then we'll talk with you briefly about the differences between services and server. And again, we are covering both in this course to get you a foundation on both sides, both the free and the expensive. Then we're going to talk about what problems does SharePoint solve, and I'll introduce you to the scenario we'll be running all the way throughout the course. Then we're going to talk about the features, a few of the features in SharePoint that are available to solve some of the problems we're going to be talking about. And then, of course, at the end, we'll talk about what we covered. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, about your instructor, I am Coach Culbertson, and I've been around IT and for about 10 years now, going on probably 11. I stopped counting after a while, start to feel a little bit old. So I've been around the block several times. In terms of my credentials, I'm MCTS, SharePoint Server 2007, Microsoft Certified System Administrator, Certified Database Administrator, Microsoft Certified Trainer, A+, Net+, CIW, and a few others along the way that not many people care too much about anymore. But nevertheless, I got quite a few skills under my belt in the last 10 and continuing to build more. I did take a short break from the industry, and I served a 2-year tour of duty as an inner city high school teacher in Chicago at Roberto Clemente High School, and it was a fantastic experience. And I actually ended up adopting a daughter out of the deal, and I had to come back to corporate America in order to make sure that I can take care of them, because you know what? Teenagers are expensive. That's what I found out. So anyway, it was a fantastic experience, and we were actually the first program in the city to produce students with multiple computer industry certifications. So a lot of really neat things happened there. And well, if it had paid more, I'd still be there, quite honestly. But I'm real proud of my kids, and if any of them are out there listening, just want to give them a shout out. All right. Let's talk about what's covered in this course a little bit. To begin with, I'm going to give you a quick lab setup, because I know a lot of you are going to want to punch around and play around with this stuff at home. And so I'm going to walk you through a really easy way to get SharePoint for free, at least for a test configuration. Microsoft has some great free resources, and I'll show you how to get those. Then I'm going to walk you through an installation of SharePoint Services 3.0. We'll talk about the requirements, of course, and all that good stuff. Then we'll talk about web apps and site collections. I'll show you how to get things rolling with services. And then, of course, we have to talk about site creation. I want to make sure you know how to create sites, and I'll give you a really cool little batch script that I think you're going to get a lot of mileage out of in that section. We'll talk about site building blocks and what makes up a SharePoint site, and then some more site building blocks, some things that are a little more advanced like blogs and wikis. Now, it wouldn't be IT if we didn't have users and groups, right? So we'll talk about how to bring users and groups in from Active Directory, which is, of course, the recommended methodology for allowing and granting access inside of your SharePoint system. Then we'll take a look at document libraries and how cool they are, because, you know, so many times we have people with folders and shared folders out there, and they're hard to get used to, they're hard to run around in, and so we provide some really cool features with document libraries, such as permissions, such as versioning, very, very cool, checking in and checking out so people can collaborate on documents. We'll also talk about custom content items and lists. Microsoft does a pretty good job of trying to plan for as many contingencies as possible, but they also know that you're going to want to get in there and start building your own stuff. And so I'll show you how to do that and how to really personalize and customize your SharePoint system for your users. We'll take a look at alerts and RSS, real easy features that are built right into SharePoint, so you can get emails when things change, as well as pick up RSS feeds so you can read about what's happening on your SharePoint system. We have to talk about monitoring SharePoint, and we'll talk about how to do that from inside of SharePoint as well as from a server perspective. We'll talk about performance monitor and such. Backup and restore, well, backup early, backup often, right? Well, SharePoint has its own built-in backup system. It's very cool, and it also makes it for a real easy move whenever you have to transfer your stuff to a different server. And by the way, we'll also be covering that section in a little greater detail when we start talking about Microsoft Office SharePoint Server 2007, because I'm going to show you how to upgrade a 3.0 services install to a server installation, as well as show you the exact technique that you'll need to move one information from one box to another. It's very cool and it's very easy. So those two do kind of tie in together. Then, of course, I need to talk with you about setting up an extranet. How do people get access to your SharePoint site from the outside world? And then going right along with that, we have to talk about SSL, secure socket layer configuration, and I'll show you how to set that up from both inside of server as well as IIS and in SharePoint. Then we'll be hitting of course, the installation video, and in that one I'll be not only taking you through a clean installation of SharePoint Server 2007 in a standalone configuration, but also, like I said earlier, how to move your stuff from one system to the other. We'll talk about workflows. Workflows are a real easy way to gain approval of a document and collect feedback on that document so you can enhance it. We'll talk about personalization in My Site, some really cool features that are built only into SharePoint Server 2007, one of the extra features that are included in. And it's really kind of neat because it gives our users a little more ownership of the SharePoint system. We'll talk more about that. Excel services and the reporting center will be looking at building dashboards and KPIs and all kinds of good stuff in there. Let me scroll down here just a little bit so you can see the last item. The search configuration for SharePoint Server is very, very cool. For the enterprise search, you can search all kinds of things, not just inside of SharePoint, but also in your shared folders, in your Exchange public folders, and even outside websites. We'll talk about that. Then we'll talk about site templates that you can pull down from Microsoft for free and install. And we'll talk about how to set up a publishing portal for an internet-facing website. And then last but not least, we'll talk about server farm installation briefly. And I'll also give you some additional certification tips and information that are just kind of odds and ends at the very end that have to do with SQL Server and authentication. All right, so let's move on. Let's talk real quickly about the differences between services and server. Services is free. You can download it, and as long as you have Server 2003, you can get that baby installed and up and running very, very quickly, but it does lack some muscle. SharePoint Server is very powerful, but it does start off at about $4,000, and that does not even include client access licenses, which are more dollars. So you're getting into some big dollars when you start moving into server. But a lot of folks think it's worth it for the additional features. Now, one thing that I want to let you know is that Server 2007 includes everything that services does, but it simply adds in more. Now, about the first half of the course, we're going to be talking about services, and everything you learn about the services section, you'll be able to apply almost directly to the server side. The features are still the same. All you're doing when you add in server is you're getting more toys. So just like in this little diagram I have down here, the core of everything is SharePoint Services 3.0. But then Server 2007 includes all of services and also includes a lot more fun toys. Things like Excel services, enterprise search, cool workflows that actually function well, and a whole lot more. So there's a lot of great things about server, and for some folks it's worth the price tag. Some folks it's not. Depends upon how many dollars you have and what kind of hardware you have laying around. So let's talk briefly about what kind of problems does SharePoint solve. Now, our scenario, we're going to be walking along with a company called Verde Petra Publishing, and they've kind of decided that their email server has had enough. Almost all their users are collaborating through email, and in a publishing company, when you're emailing documents back and forth, it just eats up the mail server like crazy, as you see in my beautiful artwork here. It eats up hard drive space, it eats up bandwidth, all kinds of issues that come along with that. And some employees even joke that their whole job is just emailing stuff back and forth all day long. Now, the CIO of the company is thinking about implementing Microsoft Office SharePoint Suite 2007 Enterprise Edition to try to solve the email crisis. He's been reading about things like document libraries, the record-keeping options, wiki pages for process documentation, workflows for book and cover proofing, and blogging, even for key members of staff. And so they're thinking about really building a whole new intranet system, because right now the intranet is only about 100 static pages and has a couple of PDFs linked in, maintained by the CEO's nephew, Bob Walpurgis. Try saying that 8 times fast, huh? Bob is about to move to the Caribbean, and you're going to be taking over as the intranet administrator. As you start to discover the capabilities of SharePoint, you realize that not only can SharePoint function as an intranet, but it can also be a centralized resource that can function as an extranet and even Verde Petra's corporate web presence as well. Now, in this course, we're going to be implementing all the elements covered, and we're going to culminate in a pretty complete solution for Verde Petra Publishing. So we're going to be doing a lot of stuff. It's going to be a lot of demonstrations, and if you set up your lab, you'll be able to play along with most of it at home. Now, issues and features inside of SharePoint that can solve a lot of problems. Simple things like an announcements list on a web page to keep everybody in the loop, discussion boards so people can communicate about different topics, document libraries for shared documents. That's an amazing, fantastic element. Even the ability to check stuff in and out to make sure that no one's editing the same documents that you are. Versioning for documents is a great way to watch a document as it changes throughout its history. And the really cool thing is you can create separate sites for departments, their projects, and even specific documents. I'm going to show you how to do all of that and a whole lot more in this class. So let's talk just a second about what we learned today so we can get on to that next video, because I know you're anxious to get started. You learned a little bit about your instructor, and then of course you learned about what's covered in this course, and then the differences between services and server, what problems SharePoint solves, and what kind of features can solve these problems. All right, so that just gives us a brief introduction about where we're going. So let's go ahead and get started with this. I'll see you as soon as you start that next video.